The crimson sunset painted the skies over Willow Creek, Texas, as Nora Mitchell clutched her worn leather satchel, staring at the dusty road ahead. Her stomach knotted with anticipation and dread as the stagecoach rattled to a stop. It was 1879, and after a grueling 3-week journey from Boston, she had arrived at her destination to meet the man she had agreed to marry through nothing more than a few exchanged letters and desperation. The small frontier town of Willow Creek spread before her, a collection of wooden structures lining the main street. Dust swirled in the late afternoon air as men in worn hats and women in simple dresses moved about their business. At 22, Nora had left behind everything familiar: her childhood home, her deceased parents' modest belongings, and the crushing poverty that had forced her to answer an advertisement for a mail-order bride. "This is it, madam. Willow Creek," announced the coach driver, helping her down. "Your intended should be waiting at the general store yonder." Nora's pale blue dress, the finest she owned, was wrinkled and travel-stained. She smoothed her hands over the fabric and adjusted her bonnet, trying to make a presentable appearance for the man who would become her husband before sundown. Frederick Caldwell stood outside the general store, just as his letters had promised. He was taller than she had imagined, with a severe face partially hidden beneath a well-trimmed beard. His clothes were of good quality, suggesting the prosperity he had written about. He owned a cattle ranch outside of town, and at 43 years old was seeking a wife to manage his household. "Miss Mitchell?" His voice was deeper than she had imagined, his eyes scrutinizing her from head to toe. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell, I'm pleased to finally meet you." She extended her gloved hand, which he took briefly. "You're smaller than I expected," he remarked, his tone flat. "I hope you're not frail. Ranch life requires strength." "I assure you, sir, I am quite capable," Nora replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I managed my parents' household for years before their passing." He nodded curtly. "The preacher is waiting. I don't see any point in delay. We'll be married immediately and return to the ranch before nightfall." Without another word, he took her satchel and began walking toward a white-painted church at the end of the street. Nora followed, her heart racing. This was happening too quickly, but what choice did she have? Her funds were depleted, and there was nothing to return to in Boston. The ceremony was brief and emotionless. Reverend Parker, a kind-faced elderly man, seemed to sense her unease, offering a sympathetic smile as he pronounced them husband and wife. Frederick barely looked at her as he slid a plain gold band onto her finger, making no attempt to kiss his bride when the ceremony concluded. "We have a long ride ahead," he stated, leading her outside to where a wagon waited. "The ranch is 10 miles from town." As they traveled in silence, the golden prairie stretching endlessly around them, Nora tried to engage her new husband in conversation. "Your letters mention the ranch has been in your family for some time," she ventured. "2 generations," he replied without turning. "My father built it from nothing. I've expanded it to 3 times its original size." "I look forward to making it a proper home," Nora said, trying to sound enthusiastic. Frederick's laugh was short and humorless. "It's already a proper home, Mrs. Caldwell. Your job is to keep it that way and to provide me with sons to inherit it." The bluntness of his statement made her cheeks flush, and she fell silent for the remainder of the journey. The Caldwell Ranch came into view as the last light faded from the sky, a large main house with several outbuildings and corrals, situated on a rise overlooking acres of grazing land. Despite her apprehension, Nora couldn't help but be impressed by its size and apparent prosperity. "You'll meet the ranch hands tomorrow," Frederick said as he helped her down from the wagon. "For now, I'll show you the house. You'll be expected to have breakfast ready by sunrise." The interior of the house was spacious but austere, with functional furniture and few decorative touches. Frederick showed her the kitchen, the parlor, his study, and finally the bedroom they would share. A simple white nightgown had been laid across the bed, a wedding gift, though he didn't acknowledge it as such. "I have accounts to review," he said. "I'll return later." "There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry." Alone in the unfamiliar house, Nora unpacked her meager belongings and changed into the nightgown. She found bread, cheese, and dried beef in the kitchen pantry and ate a small meal at the large wooden table. The silence of the house pressed in around her, broken only by the occasional distant lowing of cattle. This was her life now. She had to make the best of it. When Frederick returned hours later, he entered the bedroom without knocking. Nora lay rigid under the covers as he undressed in the darkness. His approach to their marital duties was as perfunctory as his approach to the wedding, efficient, silent, and devoid of tenderness. When it was over, he turned his back to her and was soon asleep, leaving Nora to stare at the ceiling, silent tears tracking down her temples into her hair. The next morning established the pattern of her new life. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, learning the layout of the kitchen through trial and error. Frederick ate quickly, issued instructions for the day, and departed to manage the ranch's operations. Over the following weeks, Nora settled into a routine. She cleaned the house meticulously, prepared meals, washed clothing, and tended to a small vegetable garden behind the house. Frederick rarely spoke to her beyond what was necessary, treating her more as a servant than a wife. Her first trip back to town came a month after her arrival. Frederick needed supplies and Nora accompanied him, hoping to perhaps meet some of the local women and establish connections. While he conducted business, she wandered into the general store, where a friendly woman about her age greeted her. "You must be Mrs. Caldwell," the woman said with a warm smile. "I'm Hannah Parker, the Reverend's daughter. We've been hoping to see you in town again." "It's lovely to meet you," Nora replied, grateful for the friendly face. "I've been quite busy settling in at the ranch." "We have a ladies' aid society that meets every Tuesday afternoon," Hannah offered. "You'd be most welcome to join us." Before Nora could respond, she felt Frederick's presence behind her. "Mrs. Caldwell won't have time for social gatherings," he said firmly. "She has responsibilities at the ranch." Hannah's smile faltered. "Of course, Mr. Caldwell, perhaps another time." On the ride back to the ranch, Nora gathered her courage. "I would very much like to join the Ladies' Aid Society, Frederick. Just once a week, I could, no." His voice cut through her words like a knife. "I didn't bring you here to socialize. I brought you here to be a wife and eventually a mother. The ranch requires your full attention." But surely one afternoon, the back of his hand connected with her cheek before she could finish, the force of it snapping her head to the side. Stars danced in her vision as pain bloomed across her face. "Do not argue with me," Frederick said, his tone unchanged, as if he'd simply commented on the weather. "It will not end well for you." Shock rendered Nora speechless for the remainder of the journey. That night, examining the bruise forming on her cheekbone in the small mirror above the wash basin, she realized the true nature of the bargain she had made. The physical abuse became a regular occurrence in the Caldwell household. A meal not to his liking, laundry improperly pressed, or simply his foul mood after a difficult day with the cattle, all became reasons for Frederick's hand to connect with Nora's body. He was careful, though, never striking her face again after that first time, ensuring the bruises remained hidden beneath her clothing. 3 months into their marriage, Nora discovered she was with child. She hoped the news might soften Frederick, perhaps create some bond between them. His reaction was disturbingly pragmatic. "Good," he said over dinner when she told him. "You'll continue your duties until you can't any longer. I'll hire help for after the birth." That night, for the first time, he didn't demand his marital rights, apparently concerned for his heir. It was the only kindness he showed. As her pregnancy progressed, Nora's body ached with the combination of her condition and the household work Frederick still expected her to complete. One evening in her 6th month, exhausted from a day of canning vegetables from the garden, she accidentally dropped a plate while serving dinner. Frederick's reaction was swift and brutal. He grabbed her arm, twisting it painfully as he dragged her to her feet. "Clumsy fool," he snarled, shoving her against the wall. "Do you have any idea what it costs to replace dishes out here?" "Please," Nora gasped, protecting her swollen belly with her free arm. The baby needs a mother who isn't an incompetent waste," he growled, raising his hand. The blow never came. Instead, a sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Frederick released her abruptly. "Clean this up," he ordered, straightening his vest and moving to answer the door. Nora's hands shook as she gathered the broken pieces of crockery, straining to hear the conversation at the door. A deep, unfamiliar voice carried into the kitchen. "Evening, Mr. Caldwell. Name's Quinn Foster. Your foreman Jennings mentioned you might need an extra hand for the fall roundup." "Foster, don't believe I know you. Just rode in from Colorado Territory. Been working cattle most of my life. I can provide references if needed." There was a pause, and Nora could picture Frederick evaluating the stranger with his cold, calculating eyes. "We are short-handed," Frederick finally said. "You can bunk in the hands' quarters tonight. We'll see how you work tomorrow. If you're satisfactory, I pay fair wages for good work. Appreciate the opportunity, sir." The door closed, and Frederick returned to the kitchen, where Nora had finished cleaning the broken dish and was serving his dinner with trembling hands. "That's the new hand," he said unnecessarily. "He'll be joining the others for the roundup next week. Make sure there's enough food prepared." "Yes, Frederick," she murmured, keeping her eyes downcast. The next morning, Nora caught her first glimpse of Quinn Foster as he crossed the yard toward the stables. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin that spoke of years working outdoors. He wore a worn leather hat pulled low over his eyes, and his movements had the easy grace of a man comfortable in his own body. Unlike the other ranch hands who avoided looking at her directly likely on Frederick's orders, Quinn tipped his hat politely when he noticed her watching from the porch. His eyes, a startling clear green, held hers for a brief moment before he continued on his way. Over the next few days, Nora became aware of Quinn's presence around the ranch. He worked harder than most of the other hands, rising earlier and finishing later. Occasionally, she would feel his gaze on her as she hung laundry or carried water from the well, but whenever she looked up, he would be focused on his tasks. One afternoon, as she struggled with a heavy bucket of water, her advancing pregnancy making the chore increasingly difficult, Quinn appeared beside her. "Allow me, Mrs. Caldwell," he said, his voice low and respectful as he took the bucket from her hands. "Thank you, Mr. Foster, but I can manage," she protested weakly, conscious of what Frederick would say if he saw another man doing her work. "I'm sure you can, madam, but there's no sense in making things harder than they need to be." His eyes flickered briefly to the fading bruise on her wrist where Frederick had grabbed her days earlier. His expression remained neutral, but something in his gaze told Nora he understood exactly what kind of man her husband was. "Mr. Caldwell doesn't approve of the hands interfering with household matters," she said quietly. Quinn nodded slowly. "I understand, madam, but Mr. Caldwell is riding the north section today with Jennings, won't be back until supper." He carried the bucket to the house and set it just inside the kitchen door. "If you need anything else carried, I'll be mending the corral fence for the next hour or so." He departed without waiting for a response, leaving Nora staring after him in confusion and something dangerously close to hope. The following Sunday, Frederick departed after breakfast to meet with a cattle buyer in a neighboring town, announcing he wouldn't return until the next day. It was a rare day of respite for Nora, who planned to use the time to rest her aching back and swollen feet. She was sitting on the porch in the afternoon sunlight, enjoying the peaceful moment when she saw Quinn approaching from the direction of the bunkhouse. He carried something in his hands, and as he drew closer, she recognized it as a small wooden cradle. "Afternoon, Mrs. Caldwell," he said, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. "Hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all, Mr. Foster," she replied, curious about his purpose. He held up the cradle. "Made this in my spare time. Noticed you didn't seem to have one yet, and—" He trailed off, suddenly seeming uncertain. Nora's eyes filled with tears. It was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, sanded smooth and carved with delicate patterns of leaves and vines along the edges. "Mr. Foster, I don't know what to say. It's lovely." "It's nothing fancy," he said, climbing the steps and setting it down beside her chair. "Just seemed like something that might be needed soon." "It's the most thoughtful gift I've ever received," she said honestly, running her fingers over the smooth wood. Thank you. Quinn removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. Without the hat shadowing his face, Nora could see his features clearly: a strong jaw, straight nose, and those remarkable green eyes framed by lines that suggested he smiled often, though she had rarely seen him do so. Mrs. Caldwell, he began, his voice lower now, I hope you'll forgive my boldness, but I've been on this ranch long enough to see how things stand between you and your husband. Nora tensed, her hand automatically going to her belly in a protective gesture. I'm not one to interfere in a man's marriage, Quinn continued, but I can't stand by watching a woman, especially one in your condition, being treated the way you are. Mr. Foster, please, Nora whispered, glancing around fearfully. If my husband were to hear such talk, he's gone until tomorrow, and the other hands are off for the day, Quinn assured her. I just want you to know that if you ever need help, you only have to ask. The kindness in his voice broke something inside her, and before she could stop herself, tears were streaming down her face. Quinn immediately knelt beside her chair, not touching her but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you, he said gently. You haven't, she managed between quiet sobs. It's just been so long since anyone showed me kindness. They sat in silence for a few minutes, Nora collecting herself while Quinn waited patiently. Finally, she wiped her eyes with her handkerchief and looked at him directly. Why would you risk your position here to help me? You hardly know me. Quinn's expression was solemn. My mother was in a similar situation. No one helped her, and she died from my father's beatings when I was 10. I swore I'd never stand by and watch it happen to another woman if I could help it. The raw honesty in his voice struck Nora to her core. I'm so sorry about your mother, he nodded acknowledgement. I should go before I cause you more trouble, but remember what I said, Mrs. Caldwell. You're not alone. As he rose to leave, Nora impulsively reached out and touched his hand. Nora, my name is Nora. A smile transformed his face, making him suddenly handsome in a way she hadn't noticed before. Nora, he repeated, as if tasting the name, it suits you. After he left, Nora sat staring at the cradle for a long time, her mind whirling with conflicting emotions. Quinn Foster represented danger. Frederick would kill her if he suspected any impropriety, but he also represented something she had thought lost forever: hope. Frederick returned the next day in a foul mood, the cattle deal having fallen through. His anger found its usual outlet, and Nora endured a new set of bruises on her arms and back. The cradle Quinn had made was hidden in the storage shed behind the house, where Frederick never ventured. Over the following weeks, Quinn found small ways to ease Nora's burden without drawing attention. A pail of water would appear on the porch just when she needed it. Firewood was always stacked neatly by the kitchen door. Once, after a particularly brutal night with Frederick, Nora found a small jar of salve tucked beneath the bench by the well, with a note in rough handwriting. For the pain. October brought cooler temperatures and the fall roundup. Frederick was away from the ranch for days at a time, overseeing the gathering and sorting of cattle. During one such absence, Nora was hanging laundry when a wave of dizziness overcame her. She would have fallen if Quinn hadn't appeared seemingly from nowhere to steady her. You should be resting, he admonished gently, guiding her to sit on a nearby stump. The work doesn't rest, she replied, trying to smile despite her exhaustion. Quinn frowned, taking in her pallor and the dark circles beneath her eyes. When is your time? Another month, according to what my mother taught me, Nora said, rubbing her swollen belly. Though it feels like it could be any day. And Caldwell still has you working like this. Anger flashed in Quinn's eyes. It's not right, Nora. It was the first time he'd used her given name aloud, and something in the way he said it made her heart beat faster. It's the life I agreed to, she said softly. No one agrees to be beaten, Quinn replied, his voice tight. No one agrees to be worked to exhaustion while carrying a child. Nora had no answer for that. The truth was, she had begun to wonder how much longer she could endure Frederick's treatment. Not for herself, perhaps, but for her child. What kind of father would he be to a son? What kind of father would he be to a daughter? I should finish the laundry, she said finally, starting to rise. Quinn placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Let me help you back to the house. The laundry can wait. Frederick will notice if it's not done. Then I'll finish it after you're settled." "You can't. I can and I will," Quinn interrupted firmly. "No one will know. The other hands are all out with the herd." Too tired to argue further, Nora allowed him to support her back to the house. Inside, he helped her to a chair and brought her a cup of water. "Rest here," he instructed. "I'll take care of the laundry." As he turned to go, Nora caught his hand. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Quinn looked down at their joined hands, then met her eyes. "Because you deserve kindness, Nora, and because—" He hesitated, then continued softly, "Because I've never met anyone like you, someone who endures so much but still has gentleness in her heart." Before she could respond, he squeezed her hand once and left to finish the laundry. Nora sat frozen, his words echoing in her mind. No man had ever spoken to her that way, certainly not Frederick, whose courtship letters now seemed like cruel deceptions. That evening, alone in the house, Nora made a decision. If her child was a girl, Frederick would likely be disappointed, perhaps even angry. His violence might extend to an innocent baby. If her child was a boy, Frederick would raise him to be like himself, cold, calculating, and cruel. Either way, she could not allow her child to grow up in this house of pain. She had to leave, but where would she go? With no money of her own and a baby coming, her options were severely limited. Her thoughts turned inevitably to Quinn. Could she trust him? Would he truly help her, knowing the risk? The opportunity came sooner than she expected. The next afternoon, Frederick returned from the roundup early, in a rage over a significant number of cattle missing from the herd. He blamed the hands' incompetence and stormed into the house, already half drunk from a stop at the saloon in town. Useless, all of them. He shouted, throwing his hat across the room. "Especially that new man, Foster. Standing there questioning my count like he knows my herd better than I do." Nora's blood ran cold at the mention of Quinn's name. "I'm sure they're doing their best," she ventured cautiously, setting a plate of food before her husband. Frederick's hand shot out, knocking the plate to the floor. "Their best isn't good enough, and neither is this slop you call food." He rose from his chair, advancing on her with a familiar look in his eyes that made her back away instinctively. "You're as useless as they are," he growled. "Months of feeding and housing you, and what do I have to show for it? A clumsy, whining wife and a bastard that probably isn't even mine." The accusation was so absurd that Nora gasped in shock. "Frederick, I have never." His fist connected with her stomach before she could finish, driving the air from her lungs and sending her crashing against the wall. As she doubled over in agony, a horrifying realization dawned. He was deliberately targeting her womb. "Frederick, please," she begged, sliding to the floor as she tried to protect her belly. "The baby, I don't want a child that might be another man's," he snarled, his face contorted with drunken rage. "I've seen how Foster looks at you. Don't think I haven't noticed." He drew back his boot to kick her, but the kitchen door burst open with a crash. Quinn stood in the doorway, his face a mask of cold fury, a rifle in his hands. "Step away from her, Caldwell," he commanded, his voice deadly quiet. Frederick whirled to face him. "How dare you enter my house? This is between me and my wife." "Not anymore," Quinn replied, the rifle steady in his hands. "Mrs. Caldwell needs a doctor and you need to back away." Now, Frederick seemed to calculate his chances, then sneered. "You think you can take my wife, a drifting nobody like you?" "I'm not taking anything that's yours," Quinn said evenly. "I'm stopping you from murdering an innocent woman and her child. Now back away before I put a hole in you that can't be fixed." Something in Quinn's tone must have convinced Frederick of his seriousness, because he took a step back, his hands raised slightly. "This isn't over, Foster," he spat. "The law's on my side. A man has rights over his wife." "Not these rights," Quinn replied, moving to Nora's side while keeping the rifle trained on Frederick. "Are you hurt badly?" he asked her softly. Nora could only nod, clutching her stomach as a sharp pain lanced through her. "The baby," she whispered. I think it's coming." Quinn's expression hardened further. "We need to get you to town, to the doctor." He glanced at Frederick. "You, sit in that chair and don't move." "You'll hang for this." Frederick warned, but complied, sinking into the kitchen chair. Quinn helped Nora to her feet, supporting most of her weight. "Can you walk to the barn? My horse is there." Nora nodded weakly, taking a stumbling step. Another pain gripped her stronger than before, and she would have fallen if Quinn hadn't caught her. "Change of plans," he muttered, and in one fluid motion, he scooped her into his arms, still somehow keeping the rifle pointed in Frederick's general direction. "You make one move toward us, Caldwell, and it'll be your last." Carrying Nora, Quinn backed out of the kitchen onto the porch. Frederick remained seated, his eyes burning with hatred. "He'll come after us," Nora gasped as Quinn carried her swiftly toward the barn. "Let him try," Quinn replied grimly. "Right now, we need to get you to safety." In the barn, Quinn quickly saddled his horse, a sturdy black gelding. He fashioned a makeshift step to help Nora mount, then climbed up behind her, cradling her against his chest. "Hold on," he instructed, wrapping one arm securely around her while controlling the horse with the other. "It'll be rough, but we need to put distance between us and Caldwell." They rode out of the ranch yard at a gallop, heading not toward town but toward the open country to the east. Nora clung to Quinn's arm, each jolt sending fresh waves of pain through her abdomen. "Where are we going?" she managed to ask between contractions that were coming with alarming frequency. "I have a friend with a homestead about 5 miles from here," Quinn explained, his breath warm against her ear. "Martha Wilkins. She was a midwife back east before she came west. She'll know what to do." The journey was a blur of pain and fear for Nora. She was vaguely aware of Quinn murmuring encouragement, of the horse's steady rhythm beneath them, of the setting sun painting the prairie gold and crimson. By the time they reached a small cabin nestled in a grove of cottonwood trees, darkness had fallen and Nora was drifting in and out of consciousness. A stout, gray-haired woman appeared in the doorway as Quinn reined in the horse. "Quinn Foster, is that you riding in at this hour?" She called before noticing Nora slumped against him. "Good Lord, what's happened?" "She needs help, Martha," Quinn said urgently, dismounting carefully before lifting Nora down. "Her husband beat her and the baby's coming early." Martha's expression turned grim. "Bring her inside, quickly." The cabin was small but clean and warm, with a fire burning in the hearth. Quinn carried Nora to a bed in the corner while Martha bustled about, gathering supplies. "How far apart are the pains?" Martha asked, pressing a practiced hand to Nora's abdomen. "A few minutes," Quinn answered. "She's been having them since we left the ranch about an hour ago." Martha nodded, already untying Nora's shoes. "This little one's in a hurry then." "Quinn, put more water on to boil, then go wait outside. This is women's business now." Quinn hesitated, looking at Nora with concern. She managed a weak smile. "I'll be all right," she whispered. "Martha will take care of me." He nodded reluctantly, touching her hand briefly before leaving to heat the water as instructed. The next hours were the most difficult of Nora's life. The baby was coming too early, and the trauma of Frederick's attack had complicated matters. Martha worked tirelessly, her capable hands guiding Nora through the birth with quiet efficiency. "You're doing fine, child," she assured Nora through the worst of it. "Your little one is strong." "I can feel it." Outside, Quinn paced the yard, starting at every cry that escaped the cabin. He had made a decision when he saw Frederick attacking Nora, a decision that would change all their lives. There was no going back now. Frederick Caldwell would never stop hunting them, would never allow his wife and child to escape his control. Quinn had known men like him before, proud, possessive, and deadly when crossed. Just before dawn, a different cry pierced the night, the thin wail of a newborn baby. Quinn froze mid-step, his heart hammering in his chest. Moments later, Martha appeared at the door. "You can come in now," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. Her tired face broke into a smile. "It's a girl, small but healthy by the grace of God." Quinn entered the cabin, removing his hat as he approached the bed. Nora lay pale against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat, but her eyes were clear and filled with wonder as she gazed at the tiny bundle cradled in her arms. "Quinn," she said softly, looking up at him, "come meet my daughter." He moved closer, hardly daring to breathe as he looked down at the small, red face of the newborn. The baby's eyes were closed, her tiny fists clenched beside her cheeks. She's perfect, he whispered, overcome with emotions he couldn't name. Would you like to hold her? Nora asked. Before he could answer, Martha interrupted gently. Let's let mother and child rest first. Quinn, I need to speak with you outside. Once they were on the porch, Martha's expression turned serious. That woman has been through a terrible ordeal, the bruises on her body. She shook her head in disgust. If her husband finds her, he'll kill her this time. He won't find her, Quinn stated firmly. I'll make sure of it. And how do you propose to do that? Frederick Caldwell has money and influence in these parts. He'll have the sheriff looking for his kidnapped wife and child by noon. Quinn's jaw tightened. I've been saving for a place of my own up in Colorado Territory. It's remote, good land with water. We could disappear there. Martha studied him for a long moment. You care for her. It wasn't a question, but Quinn answered anyway. Yes, more than I should, given she's another man's wife. A man who beat her and tried to kill her unborn child, Martha pointed out. In the eyes of God, I'd say that breaks any vows she made. She sighed, placing a weathered hand on Quinn's arm. But you're right about one thing, you can't stay here. Caldwell will search every inch of this territory. How soon can they travel? Quinn asked. Not for at least a week, maybe 2, Martha replied firmly. Nora lost a lot of blood and the baby is early. They both need time to recover their strength. Quinn nodded, his mind racing through possibilities. I'll ride back toward town, but stay hidden. I need to know what Caldwell is doing, how far he's spreading his search. Be careful, Martha warned. That man struck me as dangerous the one time I met him in town. I will, Quinn promised. Take care of them until I return. He left as the sun was rising, riding a wide circle around the Caldwell ranch to avoid detection. From a hill overlooking the property, he observed unusual activity, several men on horseback gathering in the yard, including the sheriff from Willow Creek. Frederick was gesturing angrily, pointing in various directions. The search was beginning. Quinn spent the day gathering information, carefully avoiding being seen while listening to conversations in town. As expected, Frederick had reported his wife kidnapped by a ranch hand, offering a substantial reward for information. The sheriff had deputies searching in all directions, focusing on the roads to neighboring towns. No one was looking east toward Martha's isolated homestead. At least not yet. When Quinn returned that evening, he found Nora sitting up in bed, nursing her daughter. The sight stopped him in the doorway, his hat in his hands. I'm sorry, he said, starting to back out. I didn't mean to intrude. It's all right, Nora replied, a slight blush coloring her pale cheeks. We're finished anyway. She carefully adjusted her clothing and settled the sleeping baby beside her. Did you learn anything? Quinn entered, taking a seat on the chair beside the bed. Caldwell has the sheriff and his deputies searching for us, mainly along the roads to town. He's offered $500 for information. Nora's eyes widened. That's a fortune. He wants you back, Quinn said simply. Or rather, he doesn't want to lose what he considers his property. He doesn't care about me or the baby, Nora said, stroking her daughter's cheek with a gentle finger. He just can't stand being defied. You know him better than anyone, Quinn acknowledged, which is why we need to make plans. Once you're strong enough to travel, we can't stay in this territory. Where would we go? Nora asked, her voice small. Quinn leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I have land in Colorado Territory near a place called Silverdale. It's remote in the mountains, but beautiful. Good water, good soil. I've been building a cabin there whenever I could get away. You would take us with you? Nora's eyes searched his face. Why, Quinn? Why risk everything for us? Quinn was silent for a long moment, organizing his thoughts. When I first came to the Caldwell Ranch, I was just looking for work until spring, when I planned to return to my land. Then I saw you working so hard despite your condition, bearing those bruises with such quiet dignity. He looked down at his hands. My mother died because no one helped her. I couldn't let that happen to you. Is that the only reason? Nora asked softly. Quinn raised his eyes to meet hers. No, he admitted. Though I had no right to feel it, I came to care for you, Nora, more than care. But I would have kept my distance if Caldwell hadn't tried to kill you and your child. Nora reached out, her fingers brushing his calloused hand. I felt it too, she whispered. Your kindness was like water in a desert to me. I just never thought that anything could come of it. Quinn finished for her. Neither did I, but circumstances have changed everything. If we go with you to Colorado, Nora said carefully, what would I be to you? I'm still legally married to Frederick. You would be whatever you choose to be, Quinn replied. I offer you safety and a home for you and your daughter, with no expectations beyond that. In time, perhaps we could find a way to legally end your marriage to Caldwell, but that's for the future to decide. The baby stirred between them, making tiny mewing sounds that drew both their attention. Nora gathered her daughter close, her expression thoughtful. What shall I call her? She mused aloud. I had thought to name her after my mother, Elizabeth, but now, she looked up at Quinn. Now I want her to have a name that represents her new beginning, our new beginning. What was your mother's middle name? Quinn asked. Hope, Nora replied with a small smile. Elizabeth Hope Mitchell? Hope, Quinn repeated. It seems fitting, Nora nodded, gazing down at her daughter. Hope Foster, she said softly, then looked up quickly. I mean, I like it, Quinn interrupted gently. But only if you're sure, Nora. This is a decision that can't be made lightly. I've never been more sure of anything, she replied. Frederick tried to kill her before she was even born. He has no claim to her, not in my heart. If we're starting a new life, I want her to have a new name, one that isn't tainted by his cruelty. Quinn's heart swelled with emotions he couldn't express. Instead, he simply nodded. Hope it is then. Over the next 10 days, Nora regained her strength while Quinn made preparations for their journey. He purchased a small wagon and supplies from a trading post 30 miles away, where news of the kidnapping hadn't yet spread. Martha contributed what she could: extra blankets, preserved food, and herbal medicines for Nora and the baby. The journey will be difficult, Martha warned as they loaded the wagon on the evening before their departure. It's nearly 200 miles to Silverdale over rough country. We'll take it slow, Quinn assured her. Follow the old trapper's trail north, then cut west through the high country. With luck, we'll reach my cabin before the first heavy snow. Martha turned to Nora, who was resting on the porch with Hope in her arms. Are you certain about this, child? It won't be easy starting over in a strange place. Nora looked at Quinn, then back to Martha. I'm certain. I owe Quinn my life and my daughter's life. Besides, she added with a soft smile, it doesn't feel strange when I'm with him. It feels right. They left before dawn the next morning, the wagon loaded with their meager possessions and supplies. Quinn had fashioned a snug bed for Nora and Hope in the back, cushioned with straw and blankets. He drove carefully, avoiding the main trails and keeping to the less traveled routes through the rolling prairie. The first week of travel passed without incident. They moved slowly, stopping frequently for Nora to rest and care for Hope. The baby was thriving despite her early arrival, gaining strength each day. At night, they camped in sheltered spots, Quinn keeping watch while Nora and Hope slept in the wagon. On the 8th day, as they were crossing a shallow river, the first sign of trouble appeared. Quinn spotted fresh hoofprints on the far bank, several horses, moving fast. Riders passed this way recently, he told Nora as he helped her and Hope back into the wagon after a brief rest. Could be nothing, but we should be cautious. That evening, instead of making camp at dusk as usual, Quinn pressed on until full dark, finding a hidden hollow surrounded by dense brush to conceal the wagon. He built no fire, and they ate a cold supper while listening intently to the night sounds around them. You think it's Frederick? Nora whispered as they sat huddled under blankets in the wagon. I don't know, Quinn admitted. But we're getting close to the territorial border. If he's still searching, this would be his last chance to find us before we're beyond his reach. Nora clutched Hope closer, fear evident in her eyes. What if he does find us? Quinn checked his rifle, making sure it was loaded. Then I'll do whatever's necessary to protect you both, he said simply. They continued their journey at first light, moving with greater caution. Quinn frequently scouted ahead, watching for signs of pursuit. By midday, they had reached the foothills of the mountains that marked the border between territories. The terrain grew steeper, the wagon creaking as it climbed the rough trail. Late in the afternoon, as they rounded a bend in the trail, Quinn reined in the horses abruptly. Ahead, blocking the narrow path, were 3 mounted men. Frederick Caldwell sat in the center, a shotgun resting across his saddle. "I believe you have something that belongs to me, Foster," Frederick called, his voice carrying in the still mountain air. Quinn slowly reached for his rifle. "Nora and Hope don't belong to anyone, Caldwell, least of all a man who tried to kill them." Frederick's face darkened with anger. "My wife and my child are coming home with me. The law's on my side in this, as these gentlemen can attest." He gestured to the men flanking him. One wore a deputy's badge, the other appeared to be a hired gun. Quinn turned slightly, speaking low to Nora, who sat frozen behind him. "When I tell you, take Hope and run into those trees to the right. Don't stop, no matter what you hear." "Quinn, no," she pleaded, clutching his arm. "There are 3 of them." "I'm not asking," he replied firmly. "Hope needs her mother, now get ready." Frederick was growing impatient. "Send my wife out, Foster, and perhaps I'll let you live." Quinn stood slowly in the wagon, his rifle held loosely in his hands. "Your wife doesn't want to go with you, Caldwell, and after what you did to her and your daughter, no decent man would force her." "That's my decision to make, not yours," Frederick snarled. "Nora, show yourself." Quinn used the moment of distraction to raise his rifle and fire at the ground near the horse's hooves. The animals reared in panic as the shot echoed through the hills. "Now, Nora," Quinn shouted, firing again as Frederick and his companions struggled to control their mounts. Nora clutched Hope to her chest and scrambled from the wagon, running for the cover of the pine trees Quinn had indicated. Behind her, she heard more shots, men shouting, the terrified whinnies of horses. She didn't look back, focusing only on putting distance between herself and the confrontation, protecting her daughter with every ounce of her strength. The forest was dense, the ground covered with pine needles that muffled her footsteps. Nora ran until her lungs burned, until Hope's frightened cries forced her to stop and catch her breath. Finding a hollow beneath a fallen tree, she crawled inside, cradling her daughter close and trying to quiet her sobs. "Hush, my love," she whispered, rocking Hope gently. "We must be very quiet now." Time passed with excruciating slowness. The gunfire had stopped, but Nora couldn't tell who had prevailed. The forest around her was silent except for the occasional call of a bird or rustle of small animals in the underbrush. As the minutes stretched to an hour, fear and uncertainty gnawed at her. Had Quinn been killed? Was Frederick searching for her even now? The sound of approaching footsteps made her press deeper into her hiding place, one hand covering Hope's mouth to stifle any noise. The footsteps came closer, stopped, then continued more slowly. "Nora," Quinn's voice, low and cautious, called from nearby. "Nora, it's safe now." She remained frozen, afraid it might be a trick. Then Quinn appeared through the trees, his shirt torn and bloodied on one sleeve, but very much alive. Relief flooded through her. "Quinn," she cried, crawling out from the hollow with Hope clutched tightly to her chest. He rushed to her side, gathering both of them in his arms with a gentleness that belied the violence he had just endured. "Are you both all right?" "We're fine," Nora assured him, examining the blood on his arm with concern. "You're hurt, just a graze," he dismissed. "We need to keep moving. I disabled their horses, but they'll be on foot behind us once they regroup." "Frederick?" Nora asked hesitantly. "Alive, unfortunately," Quinn said grimly. "He and the deputy took cover when the shooting started. The third man caught a bullet, but I don't think it was fatal." They hurried back to the wagon, which Quinn had managed to turn around during the confrontation. The horses were lathered with sweat but unharmed. Quinn helped Nora and Hope into the back, then climbed to the driver's seat. "There's another trail about 2 miles ahead," he explained as he urged the horses forward. "It's steeper, harder to follow, but it will take us to my land. If we push through the night, we should reach it by morning." The journey through the darkness was harrowing. The trail narrowed, at times seeming to disappear altogether as it wound through the mountains. Quinn guided the horses with expert hands, stopping only when necessary to rest the team. Nora dozed fitfully, waking at every unusual sound, constantly checking on Hope, who slept peacefully despite the rough travel. As dawn broke, the trail began to descend into a valley nestled between towering peaks. A crystal-clear stream wound through meadows still green despite the advancing autumn. And there, on a gentle rise overlooking the valley, stood a small cabin, its log walls golden in the early morning light. "We made it," Quinn said softly, reining in the horses. "Welcome to your new home, Nora." Tears filled her eyes as she took in the peaceful scene. "It's beautiful, Quinn, more beautiful than I imagined." The cabin was simple but sturdy, with a stone chimney and a small covered porch. Inside was a single large room with a fireplace, a rough-hewn table and chairs, and a bed frame that Quinn had constructed but not yet finished. The windows were covered with oiled paper rather than glass, but they let in plenty of light. "It's not much," Quinn apologized as he carried their supplies inside. "I had planned to finish it properly next spring." "It's perfect," Nora assured him, cradling hope as she examined what would be their new home. "We'll make it comfortable together." They spent the day settling in, Quinn tending to the horses and securing the wagon while Nora organized their meager belongings. By evening, with a fire crackling in the hearth and a simple meal prepared, the cabin already felt more like home than the Caldwell ranch ever had. Quinn insisted on sleeping outside that night, concerned that Frederick might still be pursuing them. "Just until I'm sure we're safe," he explained, preparing a bedroll on the porch. Nora wanted to protest but understood his caution. Before he left for his watch, she caught his hand. "Quinn, I don't know how to thank you for what you've done for us." He smiled, the firelight casting his features in warm shadow. "Seeing you and Hope safe is all the thanks I need." "Even so," she continued, "I want you to know that whatever happens, whatever future we build here, I'm grateful for this chance at a new life." Quinn gently squeezed her hand. "Get some rest, Nora. Tomorrow is the first day of that new life." The days quickly settled into a routine. Quinn worked to winterproof the cabin, adding chinking between the logs, building proper shutters for the windows, and constructing a lean-to shelter for the horses. Nora focused on making the interior comfortable, using skills she had learned as a child to create curtains from spare fabric and fashioning a proper cradle for Hope from a hollow log Quinn provided. As October gave way to November, the nights grew colder, and the first dusting of snow whitened the high peaks around their valley. Quinn returned from hunting one afternoon to find Nora standing outside the cabin, Hope bundled against her chest, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. "It never stops being beautiful, does it?" she said as he approached, a brace of rabbits in his hand. "No," he agreed, though his eyes were on her face rather than the scenery. In the weeks since their arrival, color had returned to her cheeks, and the haunted look that had shadowed her eyes was fading. Hope, too, was thriving, growing stronger each day, her tiny features beginning to show Nora's delicate bone structure. "Quinn," Nora began hesitantly, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you." "Anything," he replied, setting down his hunting bag. "Where do you sleep?" She blushed slightly at the directness of her question. "I know you insisted on keeping watch those first nights, but it's been weeks now, and I never see where you rest." Quinn smiled ruefully. "I fixed up the lean-to with some extra blankets. It's comfortable enough." "But winter is coming," Nora protested. "You can't sleep outside in the snow." "I've endured worse," he assured her. "Besides, it wouldn't be proper for us to share the cabin, given your situation." Nora looked down at Hope, then back to Quinn. "My situation is that I'm living alone in a remote cabin with a man who isn't my husband, raising a child that bears his name rather than her father's. Propriety seems a strange concern at this point." Quinn chuckled despite himself. "When you put it that way." "The cabin is yours," Nora continued. "You built it with your own hands. I won't have you sleeping with the horses while we take your bed." "What do you suggest?" Quinn asked carefully. Nora took a deep breath. "The cabin is large enough for both of us. You could build a screen for privacy if you wish, but there's no reason we can't share the space, especially with winter approaching." Quinn studied her face, searching for any sign of uncertainty. "Are you sure, Nora? I don't want you to feel obligated or uncomfortable." "I'm sure," she replied softly. "In fact, She hesitated, then continued with quiet determination, "I would feel safer knowing you were near." That evening, Quinn moved his few possessions into the cabin. He constructed a simple pallet near the hearth, insisting that Nora and Hope keep the bed. As they shared a meal at the small table, a comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by Hope's occasional coos from her cradle. "I was thinking," Quinn said as they finished eating, "that come spring we could expand the cabin. Add another room for Hope as she grows." Nora smiled at the thought. "And perhaps a proper garden. I've always wanted to grow flowers as well as vegetables." "Anything you want," Quinn promised. "This land is as much yours now as mine." Nora's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Do you truly mean that? After everything you've done for us, you would share your dream with us as well?" Quinn reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Nora, you and Hope have become my dream. The land, the cabin, they're just places. You two are what matters to me." "Even though I came with so much trouble?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Even then," he assured her. "Maybe especially then, what Frederick did to you revealed your true strength." "I've never known anyone as brave as you," Nora laughed softly. "I don't feel brave most of the time, just grateful to be here with Hope safe." "That's what makes you brave," Quinn insisted. "You risked everything for her future." They fell silent again, hands still joined across the table, the firelight casting dancing shadows on the log walls around them. Winter arrived in earnest by mid-November, blanketing the valley in snow and limiting their world to the cozy confines of the cabin and the immediate surroundings. Quinn ventured out daily to tend the horses, check his trap lines, and gather firewood, but the deep snow made longer journeys impossible. For Nora, who had known nothing but work and fear for so long, the quiet days were a revelation. She found joy in simple tasks, preparing meals, mending clothing, watching Hope discover her hands and feet. In the evenings, she and Quinn would sit before the fire, talking of their pasts and their hopes for the future. Quinn spoke of his childhood in Missouri, of his mother's death and his years of drifting afterward, working ranches across the West until he saved enough to claim his own land. Nora shared stories of her life in Boston, of her parents' gentle guidance and their deaths from influenza that had left her alone and desperate enough to become a mail-order bride. One stormy night, as wind howled around the cabin and snow piled against the door, Nora finally spoke of the darkest parts of her time with Frederick. "The first time he hit me," she said quietly, staring into the fire, "I told myself it was an aberration. That he was tired or frustrated and it wouldn't happen again." She absently stroked Hope's hair as the baby nursed. "The second time I told myself I must have done something to provoke him. By the third time I began to believe I deserved it." Quinn, sitting on the floor nearby whittling a small wooden horse, set down his knife. "No one deserves that, Nora, no one." "I know that now," she said, meeting his eyes. "Because of you, you showed me kindness when I had forgotten what it felt like." She hesitated, then added, "You showed me what a real man is, Quinn. Not someone who uses his strength to harm, but someone who uses it to protect." The depth of feeling in her voice made Quinn's heart ache. He wanted nothing more than to cross the small space between them, to take her in his arms and promise that no one would ever hurt her again. But he respected her too much to rush her, to assume she wanted more from him than the safety and friendship he had offered. "Any decent man would have done the same," he said finally. "No," Nora corrected gently. "Most men would have looked away as they did at the ranch. You were the only one who saw me, really saw me, and was brave enough to act." She shifted Hope to her shoulder, patting the baby's back softly. "I think about that every day." The weeks passed in peaceful routine. Christmas approached, bringing with it a new sense of anticipation. Quinn disappeared into the forest one morning and returned with a small pine tree, which they decorated with strings of dried berries and paper ornaments Nora crafted from old letters. On Christmas Eve, after Hope was asleep in her cradle, Quinn presented Nora with two gifts he had been working on in secret. The first was a delicate wooden music box that played a simple tune when its handle was turned. "It's beautiful," Nora breathed, turning the small crank and listening to the melody. How did you make it? My father taught me woodworking before he became. Quinn trailed off, then continued, before things changed. I thought Hope might like it when she's older. The second gift was a silver ring, clearly fashioned from a coin that had been carefully hammered and polished into a band. I know you're still legally married, Quinn said as he placed it in her palm, but I thought you might want something to replace the ring Caldwell gave you. Something that represents your freedom rather than your bondage. Tears filled Nora's eyes as she slipped the ring onto her finger, replacing the gold band she had continued to wear out of habit. It's perfect, she whispered. She had a gift for him as well, a woolen scarf she had knitted from yarn Martha had given her, working on it late at night after Quinn had fallen asleep. It's not much, she apologized as he wrapped it around his neck. It's the first Christmas gift I've received in 15 years, Quinn replied, his voice rough with emotion. There couldn't be anything more precious. Later, as the fire burned low and snow continued to fall outside, Nora made a decision. Rising from her chair, she crossed to where Quinn sat on his pallet and knelt beside him. Quinn, she said softly, I've been thinking about what you said when we first came here, that I would be whatever I chose to be to you. He nodded, his green eyes serious in the firelight. I meant it. I still do. I know, she replied, and I've made my choice. She took his weathered hand in both of hers. If you'll have me, I want to be your wife in every way but the legal one. I want us to be a family, you, me, and Hope. Quinn's breath caught in his throat. Nora, are you sure? You don't owe me anything, and I would never. She silenced him by leaning forward and pressing her lips to his, a gentle kiss that nonetheless contained all the certainty of her decision. When she pulled back, her eyes were clear and unwavering. I'm sure, she said simply. I love you, Quinn Foster, not because you rescued us, but because of the man you are, the man who shows kindness where others show cruelty, the man who builds rather than destroys. She touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. The man I want to spend my life with, if you'll have me. Quinn's answer was to draw her into his arms, his kiss conveying what words could not: the depth of his love, the promise of his protection, the certainty of his commitment. That night, they truly became a family, their love consecrated not by law or clergy, but by the purity of their devotion to one another. Spring came to the valley in a rush of melting snow and new growth. The creek swelled with runoff from the mountains, wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and birds returned to build nests in the eaves of the cabin. Hope, now 5 months old, was a happy, thriving baby, delighting in the colorful world outside the cabin door. With the improved weather, Quinn began work on the addition to the cabin, a second room for Hope, and a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides of the structure. Nora planted her garden, carefully tending the seeds she had saved from their winter stores. In April, when the mountain passes were finally clear, Quinn made the journey to the nearest town, Silverdale, to purchase supplies they couldn't produce themselves. He returned 3 days later with a wagon full of goods and news from the outside world. I spoke with the sheriff in Silverdale, he told Nora as they unpacked the supplies. Asked about Frederick Caldwell without giving too many details. Nora's hands stilled on the bolt of fabric she was examining. What did he say? Caldwell is still looking for you, Quinn said carefully, but his search has moved south. Apparently, he received information that you were seen in New Mexico territory. Relief washed over Nora's face. So he doesn't know we're here? No, Quinn confirmed. And I registered my claim at the land office under my full name, Quincy Foster. If anyone comes looking for a Quinn Foster, they won't find official records. That was clever, Nora said, resuming her unpacking. Did you learn anything else? Quinn hesitated, then reached into his pocket and produced a folded document. I also spoke with a judge who was passing through, explained that I knew a woman whose husband had tried to kill her and her unborn child, asked what her legal options might be. Nora took the document with trembling hands. What did he say? He said that while divorce is difficult, especially when the husband objects, there are circumstances where it can be granted, extreme cruelty being one of them. Quinn gestured to the paper. That's a petition for divorce on grounds of cruelty and attempted murder. The judge said if you can get witness testimony from Martha Wilkins, for instance, you might have a case. Hope gurgled from her cradle, drawing Nora's attention momentarily. When she looked back at Quinn, her eyes were shining with unshed tears. "Do you think it's possible," she asked, hope evident in her voice, "that I could legally be free of him?" "I think it's worth trying," Quinn replied. "It would take time and we'd have to be careful, but—" He took her hand, fingering the silver ring he had made her. "I want to give you my name properly, Nora. I want Hope to be my daughter in the eyes of the law as well as in my heart." That summer passed in a blur of activity. The cabin addition was completed, the garden flourished, and Quinn expanded their livestock to include a milk cow and a dozen chickens. Nora worked alongside him, her strength and confidence growing with each passing day. Together, they built a life that neither had dared to dream possible. In August, Martha Wilkins arrived for a visit, having received Quinn's letter detailing their circumstances. She brought with her sworn testimony about Nora's condition when she arrived at the homestead, documentation that would support the divorce petition. "You've made a fine life here," Martha observed as she sat with Nora on the porch, watching Quinn play with Hope in the meadow. The baby, now 9 months old, was attempting her first wobbly steps, clutching Quinn's fingers for support. "We have," Nora agreed, her face glowing with contentment. "I never thought I could be this happy." "And the divorce?" Martha asked. "Are you certain that's what you want? It could stir up trouble, bring Caldwell back into your life." Nora's expression grew solemn. "I'm certain, not just for me, but for Hope and Quinn. I want us to be a proper family with nothing hanging over us from the past." Martha studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You've changed, Nora. There's a strength in you now that wasn't there before." "It was always there," Nora corrected gently. "Quinn just helped me find it again." After Martha's departure, carrying the divorce petition to file with the territorial court, life returned to its peaceful rhythm. Autumn painted the valley in gold and crimson, and the first light snows dusted the high peaks, a reminder that winter would soon return. One crisp October evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Hope asleep inside after an exhausting day of exploration, Quinn took Nora's hand in his. "I've been thinking," he began, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "A dangerous pastime," she teased, leaning against his shoulder. He chuckled, then continued more seriously. "I've been thinking about the future, about what we're building here." "And what conclusions have you reached?" Nora asked, curious about his pensive mood. "That I want more of this," he said simply. "More years, more memories. More children if you want them." He turned to face her fully. "I know we can't legally marry until the divorce is granted, if it ever is, but I don't want to wait to make my promises to you." From his pocket, he withdrew a new ring, this one crafted from gold he had panned from the creek, shaped into a band and etched with a simple pattern of leaves like those on Hope's cradle. "Nora Mitchell," he said softly, "I promise to love you and Hope for all the days of my life. To protect you, provide for you, and partner with you in everything we do. Will you accept this promise and make one of your own to me?" Tears spilled down Nora's cheeks as she nodded. "I promise to love you, Quinn Foster, for all my days. To stand beside you, support you, and share every joy and sorrow that comes our way. You saved more than my life when you took us from that place. You saved my heart, my hope, my future." She held out her hand, allowing him to slip the golden band beside the silver one she already wore. "My promise is as true as if spoken before God and everyone we know." Their kiss sealed the vows, a private ceremony witnessed only by the mountains and the setting sun. It was enough. More than enough. Winter came again, but this time brought not isolation but intimacy, not fear but peace. The cabin was warm and secure, stocked with provisions for the cold months ahead. Hope took her first real steps, spoke her first words, and filled the small home with laughter and wonder. When spring returned, bringing with it Hope's first birthday, Nora had news of her own to share. As they sat together watching Hope chase butterflies in the meadow, she took Quinn's hand and placed it gently on her still flat stomach. "We'll need to build another addition," she said softly, watching his eyes widen with understanding. This little one should arrive by autumn. Joy transformed Quinn's face as he gathered her in his arms. "Are you sure?" he whispered against her hair. "As sure as I can be," she replied, laughing through happy tears. "Martha taught me the signs before she left." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky, Hope sleeping peacefully inside, Quinn marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. "When I rode onto the Caldwell ranch that day, I was just looking for work," he said, his arm around Nora's shoulders. "I never imagined I would find a family. And I never imagined that the darkest time of my life would lead to the brightest," Nora replied, nestling closer to his side. "You were right about the name we gave Hope. It was fitting in ways we couldn't have known then." "Hope," Quinn repeated, smiling, "the thing that sustains us through the worst times and makes the good times even better." Together they watched the moon rise over the mountains, its silver light bathing the valley in a gentle glow. Their future stretched before them, not without challenges, perhaps, but rich with the promise of love and the family they were building together. Nora, who had come west as a mail-order bride seeking escape from poverty, who had endured brutality at the hands of the man who should have protected her, had found not just safety but true love with the quiet cowboy who had risked everything to give her a second chance. And Quinn, who had known only loneliness since his mother's death, had found the family he had always yearned for in the brave woman beside him and the children they would raise together in the home they had built with their own hands. As the years passed, their family grew first with the birth of their son in the autumn, then with twin daughters 3 years later. The cabin expanded accordingly, eventually becoming a proper ranch house surrounded by outbuildings and corrals. Their herd of cattle increased, as did their reputation in the valley for hospitality and hard work. News eventually reached them, through Martha's occasional letters, that Frederick Caldwell had died in a saloon brawl over a gambling debt. The divorce petition, still pending in the territorial court, became moot. Quinn and Nora were married officially by a traveling preacher the following spring, with Hope, now 7 years old and as spirited as her mother, serving as flower girl. Their life together wasn't without hardship: drought years, harsh winters, childhood illnesses that left them sleepless with worry, but through it all, they faced each challenge together, their love only deepening with each passing season. On the 20th anniversary of their arrival at the cabin, with their children grown or nearly so, Quinn and Nora stood on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, just as it had that first evening. "Do you ever regret it?" Quinn asked, his hair now streaked with silver but his green eyes as clear and steady as ever. "Leaving everything behind to come here with me." Nora, still beautiful at 42, her face lined with years of smiles rather than tears, leaned her head against his shoulder. "Not for a single moment," she replied. "You gave me the greatest gift anyone could receive, Quinn Foster." "What's that?" he asked, drawing her closer. "A life filled with love," she said simply. "What more could anyone ask for?" As the last light faded from the sky, they turned together and walked back into the warmth of their home, the house that had started as a simple cabin and grown along with their family, the sanctuary that had once been a desperate woman's only hope and had become the foundation of a life well lived. "Hope fulfilled, indeed,"